Hi friends, Tracy here to tell you that making a podcast is hard work. There's research, scripts, editing, and all of that can mean a million decisions. Fortunately for me, my choice in a podcast hosting platform was easy because I decided upon Anchor by Spotify. If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need all in one place. Let me explain. Anchor has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcast, and more. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started on your podcast today. Warning: Crescent City Crime contains violent and explicit content that is not suitable for a younger audience. Some topics may be disturbing or triggering for sensitive listeners. Listen at your own risk. Thank you for listening to Crescent City Crime. If you wish to further support the show, please make sure to like, rate, and review this podcast on your preferred listening platform. We can also be found on YouTube at Crescent City Crime. You can discuss episodes with other listeners in our private Facebook group or follow us on Twitter. You can also visit our merch store. All of our social media links, show notes, sources, and more can be found in our blog, nolacrimepodcast.com. That's NOLA, N-O-L-A, crimepodcast.com. We are now on Patreon. On our Patreon, we feature discussions about movies that revolve around crime and offer exclusive merch. If you would like to hear that extra content from us twice a month and access exclusive merch, subscribe to us at patreon.com/crescentcitycrime. We would appreciate it if you help spread the word about Crescent City Crime. Tell a friend or aggressively scream our podcast name at your enemies. The music used in this episode is The Black Fingerprint, and it was composed by Dylan Owen. Welcome to Crescent City Crime, dear listeners. I'm Tracy.
And I'm Brian.
And thank you for continuing to tune in week after week. We hope that you will keep your ears on us for a while.
Yes, we very much appreciate your listenership.
In the last episode, we introduced the members of the Hankton crime empire that were on the outer edges of the web. Today, we're going to focus on the inner circle of the crime family and the murder that put Telly Hankton away for life. On May 13th, 2008, Darnell Stewart, if you remember from the last episode, he was the one who had murdered George Hankton. He was driving alone when Telly and his cousin Andre encountered him on South Claiborne Avenue. Andre was driving a blue Mustang and Telly was riding shotgun. It is not known who opened fire first, but a rolling gun battle unfolded between the occupants of the vehicles. So imagine that, Brian. Just going down South Claiborne Avenue in a rolling gun battle.
Oh, boy, yeah. Treme can be a trouble spot at nighttime, but that's as troublesome as it gets.
I think that's about as bad as it can get, really, right?
Yes, that's as bad as Treme gets. Lots of vehicles pass through Treme on South Claiborne.
They have a lot of clubs out there, and like the I don't want to call it a restaurant, but it's like the wing walk-up places that are in the cargo containers. They have a lot of those.
They have those there. They make some really good wings.
They do.
Yeah.
Well, Darnell Stewart was forced to abandon his car and he fled on foot. However, Andre and Telly didn't want to miss their big chance to avenge George Hankton. So what do you think they did, Brian?
Well, they drove up behind him and shot him from the car.
Well, first, no. Actually, what they did was they rammed him with the car. And while he was lying on the ground, Telly Hankton stood over him and shot him in the face.
Well, that must have been very satisfying for him.
Oh God, that's so dark. But yeah, for him it probably was satisfying.
Some
Now,
would be more satisfied with beating someone up or stabbing someone multiple times. But characters like that, they just love to shoot.
they really do. During the murder trial, Darnell's sister Latoya was a star witness for the prosecution, and she wept while giving her testimony. She said, "At that time, we lived by a code. You can't go to the police. You could not speak about it because you'll get killed." On the night her younger brother was murdered, Latoya said that she was at her father's house on 1st and Clara Streets, which is just off of South Claiborne Avenue, when they heard gunfire. When Latoya and her father ran outside, they saw a blue Mustang turning the corner. They heard more gunfire, and then they learned that Darnell was lying dead beside a telephone pole on South Claiborne Avenue. Latoya said, "We heard gunfire. When I ran outside, I just saw a blue Mustang turning the corner." Latoya went on to tell the court that her brother did not use guns and that he never shot anyone, and that Jesse Reed and Karen Peters, I know, were the ones who shot George Hankton, and that George knew that they were coming to kill him. Apparently, they had run into each other at a barber shop earlier that day, and they had gotten into an argument. George was calling some of his friends to come and help, but before his backup could arrive, Jesse Reed and Karen Peters snuck up behind him and shot while Darnell waited in the car. So Darnell may not have been one of the ones to actually pull the trigger on George Hankton, but he was there. And if all he was doing was sitting in the car, then he was the one who had the least to do with it, right? Yeah.
But an accomplice
is still an accomplice, yeah.
Nonetheless, or accessory in the state of Louisiana.
And
it's called accessory. And there's also accessory after the fact, which means you found out about it and you didn't report it and covered it up.
Which one has the harsher sentence?
Oh, for your principal accessory.
During the trial, forensic pathologist Dr. Richard Tracy told the jury that even though Stewart's injuries from being hit by the car were extensive, it was a line of 4 evenly spaced bullets across his face that had killed him. So is it like he shot him in 4 different points in the face? Probably. That's what that sounds like to me.
Yeah.
Prosecutors said that 8 months before George Hankton was killed, Telly and Troy Hankton fired inside of a car at Jesse Reed, Darnell Stewart, and Karen Peters. While Latoya Stewart did her part to help the state prosecute the offenders, another key witness would emerge. This man is named John Matthews, and I'm calling him the witness who would not quit. John Matthews was drafted into the Vietnam War in 1969. While he was there, his captain chose him to open a bar for the enlisted men. He was given all the equipment he needed to open a lounge and game room. When he got out of the service, he decided to lease a strip mall located in the 3400 block of South Claiborne Avenue in 1977. He opened a liquor store and then took over a daiquiri shop in the building in the 1990s. He installed new lighting and cameras himself and made other improvements to the property over the years. It would be footage from those very cameras that captured images of Telly and Andre Hankton after they murdered Darnell Stewart as they fled the scene. Matthews was also able to give an eyewitness account because he saw Telly Hankton standing over Darnell Stewart and shooting him. And he also saw Telly Hankton as he ran past the daiquiri shop, turned the corner, and fled down Louisiana Avenue. So we know right where this is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. In 2010, John Matthews had opened another daiquiri shop in New Orleans East, which is on the other end of the city. He was heading home from that shop when he noticed that he was being followed. John Matthews said in his testimony, "I had a Derringer on me that evening. I didn't have my .40 caliber, which I normally carry, because my lady got tired and she wanted to go home, and I didn't want her to go home without a weapon." So he gave his girlfriend, the .40 caliber, and she went home, so he had his little Derringer with him. The Derringer that Matthew owned is a double-barreled pistol. One barrel was loaded with a .45 caliber round, and the other contained a .410 shotgun shell.
Yeah, 45 long Colt, like from the days of the Old West.
Okay.
Except the centerfire version of it. And 410 gauge shotgun round. That's pretty common. There's several revolvers and Derringers that will shoot both the 410 shotgun cartridge or 45 long Colt.
Are all Derringers double barreled?
All modern ones are, yes. The firing pin rotates.
Ah, okay.
And to properly, to effectively shoot a Derringer, it's best to put the Derringer and use your weak hand to grasp it, and then use the thumb of your strong hand to pull the hammer back, and the finger of the same hand to pull the trigger. Whereas just one of your hands is holding the Derringer and the other one is cocking it and firing it. It's a very quick and effective way to shoot a Derringer. You shouldn't shoot a Derringer one-handed. It's really too slow.
Okay. Matthews made it home, and he went inside his house in New Orleans East and set his alarm and started watching the news. At some point, he got up to secure another weapon, but as he was doing that, his front door flew open and he was hit by automatic weapon fire. Of those terrifying moments, Matthews said, in combat training, everybody knows you get to the ground, get to the low point, and I could not get down. That's how many times I was hit. A man was standing in his doorway with a 12-gauge shotgun. He later identified this man as Thomas Hankton. Matthews said that he couldn't move, and he just watched Thomas Hankton fumble with his shotgun when he realized that he had his Derringer in his hand. He was able to fire at Thomas Hankton, but he missed, and Thomas Hankton fled the scene. Even though John Matthews saw only one shooter, it was later found out that Walter Porter was also present and had shot at Matthews. John Matthews was in a coma for 2 weeks, and according to the surgeon that operated on him, he had over 17 bullets in his body.
Okay. Now those are probably non-hollow point rounds.
So are those the ones that don't mushroom out?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, like they're instances of you have drug dealers who are wheelchair bound because they were shot, for example, 17 times by somebody with an AR-15 rifle, and most of the bullets passed through or didn't hit anything vital, but one bullet hit the lower spine.
Right, and yeah.
And, you're talking about something that's like 2/23 of an inch in diameter. So they're small bullets that are designed for penetration and typically go right through somebody.
Well, after John Matthews was released from the hospital, he left the state and he enlisted his younger brother, Curtis Matthews, to handle the sale of the properties he owned. Unfortunately, as you can probably imagine, Telly Hankton and Walter Porter did not take the survival of John Matthews well. Even though at this point John Matthews had survived and Telly Hankton was in jail awaiting trial, Walter Porter wanted to finish the job. In October of 2011, Curtis Matthews, John's younger brother, was in front of the daiquiri shop on Claiborne Avenue when Walter Porter saw him and gunned him down. It is unknown if it was a case of mistaken identity or if he knew that Curtis was a relation to John Matthew and decided to kill him in a retaliatory strike.
Probably mistaken him for his brother because they probably have similar looks.
Possibly. John Matthews said of his brother, Curtis was a kind, young guy. He was my baby brother, my mini-me. We basically did everything together, and anything he had we belonged to one another. It's really sweet. It's very sad.
Yeah.
John Matthews was 70 years old when he finally testified in court against the Hanktons. Today, he is living in anonymity and out of the state of Louisiana. The 9mm handgun used to shoot John Matthews was tied to 3 other homicides. One murder was that of Christopher Smith, and the tragic event took place only a month after the attack on John Matthews. Walter Porter was ultimately convicted of killing Christopher Smith. Another strand of this crime web involves former LSU wide receiver Nemesis Bates. Bates played at LSU in the late 1990s. An ankle injury stopped his dreams of playing in the NFL, and he returned to New Orleans and worked as a bouncer in a club and eventually opened up Nemo's Car Wash on Tulane Avenue. I don't think that's there anymore, right?
No, it ain't there no more. Car washes tend to come and go.
Yeah, they do.
It's difficult to do anything else with the property after a car wash has been there.
Yeah.
Like the system you need for a car wash is kind of sophisticated because they recycle the same exact water.
Right. Yeah, they do.
Over and over again.
Well, Bates believed that Christopher Smith had stolen money and jewelry from him and decided that hiring someone to kill him was the correct solution to the problem.
Oh, yes, it always is, yeah.
Bates was convicted of hiring Walter Porter to murder Christopher Smith, for which Porter wanted $20,000. Since he couldn't get that amount of money, Bates lent his Mercedes-Benz to Walter Porter, and a routine traffic stop while he was driving the car helped the case to be tied together. Bates testified in his own defense at the trial. His claim was that he was a victim of extortion, and he said that Christopher Smith was killed as a favor he didn't ask for, and that Porter went to the car wash and demanded money after the so-called favor. He and his attorney tried to portray Bates as a helpless, bumbling idiot, but the assistant U.S. attorney, Elizabeth Privatera, who prosecuted the case, was not fooled by the act. She told the jury, he's a manipulating, conniving liar. Bates was found guilty of solicitation to commit a crime of violence, conspiracy to use interstate commerce facilities in the commission of a murder for hire, causing death through the use of a firearm, and conspiracy to possess firearms. U.S. District Judge Sarah Vance said that she had no choice under the law but to sentence Bates to the life in prison for the crime, and he was 37 when he was sentenced. Now, that is part 2, so in part 3 we're going to talk more about Walter Porter and discuss how Telly Hankton was arrested, as well as the ongoing feud between Hankton and Jesse Reed, and the details of the trial that sent Telly Hankton away in our third and final part of this saga. Brian, do you have anything to wrap up with?
Yes, okay. So you said that in that attempted murder,
yes,
that a 9mm was used that he was shot 17 times with. So that was okay. That was obviously 115 grain weight target shooting in 9mm ammunition, which is kind of underpowered. So that explains 17 wounds that aren't fatal. Whereas, of course, with a 9mm, you want hollow points if you want to do real damage.
Well, I hope that anybody listening to this podcast is not going to use your advice for something bad.
No, we're talking about self-defense, and in actuality, an expert witness on ballistics can tell you, as many have testified in the court of law, that the use of 9mm hollow points is actually a smart idea for self-defense or for police, because chances are you won't have to fire as many rounds to stop the person who is assailing you.
Okay.
Right. You see, a hollow point is more likely to stop somebody with fewer shots than this target shooting ammunition.
Right. And also, if you get shot by a round that is target ammo and it doesn't mushroom out, then that means that like the wound channels in your body are going to be smaller, right?
Yeah, it's going to be pretty thin. 9mm is like 3/5/7 of an inch. Same diameter as 38 caliber or 357. So just the same diameter there. But chances are those rounds just may pass through you, which means of course you have to put direct pressure on the entry and the exit wound as well. Yeah, to stop the bleeding, and instead of waiting for an ambulance, which is, you don't wait for an ambulance to apply pressure to a gunshot wound to stop the bleeding.
Or you could just walk around with a bulletproof vest.
Yeah, you could. I mean, there's kids who are now taking knapsacks to school that have ballistic panels in the back of it. Right on the back of it, so that at the very least they could put the knapsack in front of them with the ballistic panel in there.
What a world we live in.
And you have some moms who are sending their kids to school in body armor, believe it or not. In addition to that, yeah.
All right. Well, dear listeners, be kind, be safe, and don't park next to vans.
And remember, boys and girls, if it's dark, it's unsafe, and you don't feel safe, don't be there in the first place. And if you're talking to the police, not as a witness or not as a victim of a crime, lawyer up.
Good night.